Y'all wanted moves. The Chiefs are making moves. It's just guys that you know or and some that you don't know. We're going to talk about all the big news, including Joe Thuney, today on Locked On Chiefs.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome back, everybody. Glad to have you here. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and that means your team every day for free on all platforms, including YouTube, which if you are there, if you would like and sub and hit the bell, we would appreciate it. He's Matt Derrick, and I'm pointing the wrong way again. He's here from ChiefsDigest.com. He's going to be with us. We're going to run down the events of today. I'm Ryan Tracy, the founder of Rogue Analytics Performance Consulting and the home of the Athletic Matrix. You can get that at rogueapc.com. That'll be in the show notes. And if you use that, use the code Locked On, and you'll get a nice little discount. I'm also the host over at RGR Football, as well as the Locked On NFL Draft Show. So thanks for making us your first listen. Make the Draft Show your second. I would appreciate it. Matt, I didn't think like Tuesday, March 22nd would be the day that they actually make like a couple of moves all at once. We do have some signings that are I think are going to provide some depth and some competition. We'll get into that a little bit later. But the big thing was, we had expectations of some money moving around this offseason. I didn't expect it to be Joe Thuney. In restructuring him, they're getting 9.6 in cap space. That is a bit of a surprise to me. I thought he'd be like third or fourth level down. Does this come as a surprise to you as well?
Not a huge surprise, because he was certainly one of the handful of guys that actually have the money to move around. I mean, Frank Clark was one. They did that. Really, the other three involved were Mahomes, Chris Jones, and Joe Thuney. And I mean, there was a natural assumption that Mahomes was going to have some money moved around because his contract is so easy to do that with, and it's built to do that. But at the same time, the Chiefs don't have to do that every year. Now, the one caveat I will say with Mahomes and all of these contracts that are a little tricky is that we don't always know when those bonuses are being paid. A lot of times, I mean, with Mahomes, we know about the guarantees. The guarantees usually kick in like on the third day of the new league year. So, for instance, this year, Mahomes' roster bonus for 2024 guaranteed. I mean, that's the rolling guarantee mechanisms in that contract. But what we don't know is when that money actually gets paid out. So his 2022 roster bonus, if it hasn't been paid, they can still move it around. I mean, we just don't know that date that's been done. And Chris Jones's has already been paid, so that's not going to be an option. You're not moving any money with Chris Jones this year. And with both Mahomes and Jones, there wasn't necessarily an urgency to do that because they'd moved money and converted bonuses before, which created, ongoing dead cap money for both those guys going forward. Now, Thuney, they hadn't done that yet. And I think that when you do it with Thuney, I mean, obviously, I think it's an acknowledgement that they know, we feel like Joe Thuney is going to be here for all 5 years of this contract. So they don't feel like that's much of a risk. I mean, they're okay moving that money around, knowing Joe Thuney is going to be around for a while and he's going to earn all that money anyway.
Yeah.
But this gives them the flexibility. I mean, it gives them some money to free some things up. They still have more to do. I mean, remember, if they get the Tyreek Hill extension done and they get an Orlando Brown Jr. contract done, both those contracts can still free up some significant salary cap savings for this year.
So it is the ongoing negotiations, and thank you. I had to go look that up just to make sure it was a 5 year. I was under the impression it was 4, but I wasn't including last year. So I had the timing right. I just had the numbers wrong. But thank you, Joe Thuney. I like what you said there, in that means that they have confidence in him being a consistent performing member of this team for quite a bit, not just the 2022 season, because this locks you in to more money down the line that could end up in dead cap if you had to part ways. I know there's an out in 2024. I don't even see that at this point, especially after you saw him step in at left tackle and actually perform in a positive light. This has to mean that he is here for the longevity in the team's eyes, correct?
Yeah, and to me, I mean, that's the thing that you really have to take in consideration with these deals, and because you've seen it with a Frank Clark. I mean, Frank Clark, remember, they moved some money around early in his contract too, and when you do that, I mean, you become married to that player. I mean, the money that they moved around on Frank Clark in 2020, going back to that restructure, and I think they even restructured a little bit in 21, but 2020 I think was the big one. I mean, that ensured that Frank Clark was almost immovable in 2022. I mean, that's the domino effect. And Joe Thuney is, I think, a guy you have no problem doing that too, because Joe Thuney's what was it, a 5 years, 63 million, something like that. Joe Thuney's going to get all that money. I mean, you're paying Joe Thuney all that money because you want to. You know that guy's going to earn it. So you have no problems. You know, it's a matter of when you pay him and when the cap hits, you just juggle that to your best advantage and don't worry about it.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the attitude that they have to have. And unfortunately, like with the Clark restructure of 2020, that was following the 2019 season. Obviously, you're coming off a Super Bowl. He was a high contributor to that season and to that Super Bowl run. But that is what buried it and put that kind of dead cap on here. Is that a reason? In fact, we should talk about that next. Is what are the next dominoes to fall there? But is that a reason why you might not have looked outside of Joe Thuney right now? Because it's a smaller contract. Let's be honest. You know, it's a total cap of what, 48 in absolute total, only 31 guaranteed. So that allows you to have a smaller impact on years that follow. Correct?
Yeah, and and the Chiefs are, I mean, they have a top-heavy salary cap roster. They've got a lot of superstars that are making a lot of money, and they've juggled around some of that money as it is. So, now there's a big drop-off between probably top 8, 10 contracts on the Chiefs and then like 11, 12, and 13. I mean, you get past the Mahomes that you've restructured and moved money. Chris Jones, you've restructured and moved money. Travis Kelce, you've restructured, moved money. Frank Clark, Joe Thuney, on down the list. By the time you get past those guys, and then you get past the Tyreek Hill, whom you can't restructure, essentially, you either have to re-sign and extend or not. And Orlando Brown, that you've either got to play under the franchise tag or extend and lower the cap number. Then you get down to the guys that, I mean, there's no room to move. I mean, they're maybe making $3 million. You don't save. I mean, the only thing you'd save with a restructure might be $20,000. I mean, you're not saving any money. These are guys that, and you may have a handful of contracts that are simply you don't want to extend, that you don't want to commit money going forward. Now, there's not that many. Like I said, I mean, the Chiefs have a handful of contracts that fit into this category, and for the most part, they have either restructured them, are restructuring, or will restructure.
Right.
Everybody else is just not a candidate.
Yeah. And I think that can change. We should look at what falls next. We'll do that coming up next. You've heard us talk about these things before. These are Built Bars, and you have to take advantage of them. The new year is rolling, whether your resolution is or not, but these things are here to help you, whether they're a meal replacement or a substitute for something that you normally would take in, maybe isn't quite as healthy for you. All you have to do is try the puffs or try the marshmallow flavors or any of these, like the coconut almond, you have the toffee almond, all kinds of options for you that taste great. They taste like a candy bar. They provide the protein that you need, 130 calories on average, 4 grams of sugar, 4 grams of net carbs, and 17 grams of protein that you need to get through the day. And they're all covered in actual real chocolate. So you get a taste of what you're looking for as well. You can replace meals. You can actually supplement meals. You can do whatever you need to get through the day. And we have a special offer for you. Go to built.com and use our code LOCKED15 to get 15% off of your order. Use the promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. So you mentioned too, and I do want to clarify because I put an instant reaction out real quick on RGR that I still think that this means in terms of the level of signings they're making right now, this tells me that I don't think that they've converted Mahomes yet. And if they haven't paid it out, like you said, that is still a possibility. And I want to say a couple of years ago that it was a late payout for someone. I don't think it was Patrick, but I think there is times where they stagger that later into the summer so that post-draft and that bit of free agent that comes along, that they have some room to maneuver. I hope that that's the situation. That, I think, leaves them, in terms of what they're going to do over the course getting into camp, a little bit more flexibility. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong. I mean, and that's why, these contracts that, we hear a lot about the details of some contracts, but and then we don't hear a lot of details about others. But the one mystery that doesn't get made public a lot is exactly that date. I mean, it's the date that roster bonuses get paid, because that impacts a lot. Now, we do find out usually when they become guaranteed. I mean, obviously this past weekend, if you're following Daniel Hunter in, Minnesota, his roster bonus for this year became guaranteed. It doesn't get paid until training camp, but it's guaranteed now. But that one, for instance, doesn't get paid till later in the year. Some get paid in March. We do know for Chris Jones's his roster bonus for this year actually guaranteed a year ago, and then it got paid this year, March 18th. So that one's done. You're not doing anything with that. So no, I mean, there's going to be a handful of contracts that it hasn't closed the door on. And the Chiefs and the NFL in general are not transparent with this stuff at all. I mean, usually if we know that a restructure has been done, the only way that we know, especially with roster bonuses, because, and this is really inside baseball for some people may just not care about this at all, but the NFLPA maintains a database, and base salaries are public information that the NFL and the NFLPA make public. So we know the base salary of every player in the NFL. What they don't make public are roster bonuses. And because we don't know that, when the roster bonus gets converted, there's no sign, because nothing changed. I mean, when Mahomes gets his roster bonus converted, it doesn't change his base salary for the year. Doesn't touch at all. The only thing that you can possibly know is if the NFLPA changes the salary cap that the Chiefs have. And the Chiefs have been less transparent in its players with restructures this year than ever before. I mean, Joe Thuney is the first one we've heard about. There may have been another one or two. I mean, we've been trying to kind of piece together, okay, how did the Chiefs have $6 million in salary cap space? And we don't know for certain if Joe Thuney's was that money. I mean, there's a reason to believe that, if you're looking at the salary cap report on Tuesday morning, says Chiefs have like a little under 6 because they made some signings. I think the latest NFLPA had 5.5 million. We think that may include Joe Thuney, but maybe not. So if you wake up on Friday morning and all of a sudden Chiefs have 12 million, they'd have maybe $14 million in space because it didn't include Joe Thuney. But that's just how messed up the NFL is when it comes to these roster bonuses, that they tell us nothing.
Yeah. I equate it to junior prom. You only know if somebody's getting some if they're actually out there dancing. And until then, you just don't know. And I watched that as well. And I was thinking, if Patrick had converted, you'd see a much bigger spike in what they had available for a day or two. So that's why I'm still operating under the idea that they haven't converted him yet. Maybe that's wrong. Maybe it's not. But what they can do next, you touched on them last segment, was the Hill extension. Number one, that should be priority number one, in my opinion. Do you think it should be for them? And do you think that it is?
Yeah, I think it's high up there. I mean, the Chiefs did not make their list of things that they wanted to get done this offseason public. I mean, Brett Veach alluded to it because he alluded to it when he said, hey, we got some things we had to get done before a Tyrann Mathieu deal could get done. So that was one of the reasons they gave for not signing Tyrann Mathieu. So I do think that Tyreek Hill's extension is high on that list because they certainly seem to want to keep him for the longer term. You don't necessarily, especially because now you've got Orlando Brown Jr.'s in that category. I mean, if you don't get Orlando Brown Jr. signed to an extension, you're looking at the prospects of going into the next offseason with Hill and Brown as potential free agents in one tag. Yeah. You can't do that. So you got to get one of these guys done for sure. And both these guys seem like guys that the Chiefs do want to keep around long term. The Hill, hey, the cap number, something they'd love to get down if they can. Everything that could be blocking the way of a Tyreek Hill extension looks like it's out of the way. I mean, there have been a couple of, big money deals that have been given out. You kind of know where the free agent market is. I mean, the Devontae Adams deal got done. Whatever it was that Christian Kirk signed got done. So you now know a little bit about where the market is and where Hill needs to fall in there. So there's really not any excuse why that can't get done sometime soon.
That's my thought as well. And there certainly is a pecking order because I think it's a little bit easier right now with the player that Tyreek Hill is to just, yes, that those two contracts really complicate what I think was cheaper a couple weeks ago. You would have loved to have gotten that done. But now that you have to accomplish it, I think we can expect that hopefully soon they get that done and we can see that savings. Because if they do, as they have in years past, the extension should knock him down to the 4 or 5 million range in 2022 to give them that space, right?
Yeah, I mean, and I don't know that. I mean, honestly, I mean, I think if you look at the really nuts and bolts of those two contracts, I mean, I think they probably fit a little bit in line for Tyreek. I mean, the Kirk contract still baffles me. I'm not going to be able to ever explain that one. But Devontae Adams, I mean, the big number, the fake number with the crazy years added on that will never be paid, they'll be restructured and renegotiated long before that, or he's going to be released as a salary cap casualty, because I doubt the Raiders are not going to be having a $30 million cap hit on him anytime soon. But hey, that 21 million per range, that's what I would have expected Tyreek Hill's contract. I mean, you were kind of hearing 5 years, 105 as being kind of the general number that was floated. That would make sense. So now, if that changes it so that, hey, all of a sudden it's 5 years for Tyreek for 135, and it's 2 years at the end that have insane numbers on them, wouldn't surprise me at all. I mean, that's a Drew Rosenhaus contract for you.
Right, exactly.
And remember, Devontae Adams and Tyreek Hill have the same agent.
Exactly. And that's what follows along, that you can get that done. But right now he's sitting at 21.9 against the cap this year. So even that restructure, even if you have to do those years in advance, you're talking about 16 savings maybe
easily
initially. Yep. So I think that's worth doing. Now, the bigger question is Orlando Brown. We're going to talk about him after we tell you about some of our newest pals. Our new partner has something that I take every day now. And by taking Athletic Greens, it helps you with everything that you need, from actually a good tasting supplement. It helps you with gut health. It gives you more energy and optimizes your immune system, all things that we all need on a daily basis. It does that with 75 high quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, as well as probiotics and adaptogens that help you start your day and get off to that start that you need. I actually take it with my coffee in the morning. It's something you can go back and forth with. It helps digestion through the day. It helps your immune system through the day. I even have my family trying it out. My wife loves it as well. And so it makes that routine fit in. It is absolutely friendly to anything that you want to do, whether it's keto or paleo, or if you're a vegan. And if you just want to live a better, more nourished life, and you don't have a specialized intake diet, it's perfectly acceptable. No GMOs, no nasty chemicals. There's plenty to go around. It's got a great price of less than a cup of coffee. That goes a long way in getting you to where you need to be. It also heads off the cold and flu season that isn't quite over yet. And it just takes one little scoop inside a glass of water and you're good to go. Right now, they're making it super easy as well. Athletic Greens is giving you a free 1-year supplement of immune supporting vitamin D, as well as 5 free packets of the product with your first purchase. All you have to do is go visit athleticgreens.com/NFL network. Again, that's nflgreens.com/NFL network. Take ownership of your health and what goes in your body with your nutrition, as well as your immune system with AG1. Orlando Brown, it is clear, in my opinion, that the tag is worth it. At, what is it, 16.2?
Yeah.
That's not a problem for me at all. It's obviously not a problem for the team, right? The front office has to feel comfortable about that. I'm sure Andy Reid is as well. The question becomes, what shape of extension do you want to give him? Given he's only played in the offense for 1 year, he obviously had some hiccups early, came around late. I think he's still got some transition to go through in trying to be the best left tackle in this offense that he is capable of. I don't think that's what we saw in 2021. Am I wrong, or is there upside for him still in this offense?
No, I don't think you're wrong at all. I mean, and that was one of the calculations that the Chiefs made when they made this deal. I mean, remember, it was still less than a year ago. I mean, Orlando Brown was not on this team at this time a year ago, just to remind you of just how things can change during the free agency period and even leading up to the draft. So the fact that Chiefs hadn't done a whole lot at this point last year either.
Right.
They still had their biggest moves ahead of them. But I mean, they calculated in the likelihood that Orlando Brown might just play this year under the franchise tag. I mean, it was a cost of the business. And part of that was exactly that. I mean, you had Orlando Brown going into a completely different offense from what he'd been playing in Baltimore, and generally a different position that he hadn't had, NFL proven experience long-term yet at that. So you're right. I mean, 1 year in Kansas City, and we saw that 1 year that there was up and down play. I mean, it was not a consistent year for Brown. Now, I think you could certainly argue, and he would argue that, hey, it got better throughout the year. But if the Chiefs were sitting back this offseason and saying, you know what, let's wait 1 more year. Let's wait because two things that can happen. One is obviously anything can happen this year, and you make a long-term deal to Orlando Brown, he gets hurt. I mean, yeah, you'd love to say, okay, let's go ahead and just play under the franchise tag. The other possibility, of course, is that he plays incredibly, and maybe you have to pay a surcharge next offseason,
Right.
that for not signing him this year. But once again, that circles back to Tyreek Hill in that you have a tremendous amount of a leverage if you're the Chiefs with that franchise tag in Brown next year. Because honestly, the way that the NFL does the salary cap for offensive linemen, it's for offensive linemen. It's not left tackles.
Right.
And that makes that left tackle tag really cheap.
Affordable.
Very affordable, very reasonable. And even if you had to tag somebody a second year. So the leverage that the Chiefs have with that, I mean, they have more leverage with that salary tag at left tackle than it does at wide receiver, which is why you'd love to get Hill done, have that leverage over Brown and say, you know what, we could tag you again. Let's get a deal done. I mean, if for the Chiefs and you're completely sold on Orlando Brown and you don't need to see anything more, you sign him now, whatever the cost. You get it done. Because I mean, like I said, the worst case scenario is that the guy goes out there and has a Pro Bowl season, and now you're paying 20%.
Right? Yep. And that's actually what is it? The tag next year is 120%, right? So we're talking about adding a 3.25 onto the 16.2. So we're at 19.5. That's still a deal by today's standards for a player of that level.
And honestly, if you signed Orlando Brown to a $20 million per year extension deal right now, a new deal, a year from now, if he's a Pro Bowler, that might be $24 million.
Yeah. It very much is echoing what we're seeing with Patrick and what we're seeing with the total numbers for these quarterbacks. It's hard for me to even fathom right now.
Patrick now looks already underpaid.
Right, exactly. And not two Hall of Fame quarterbacks, just to one, but to some others that are very, very iffy. That's a whole other topic. Maybe we'll talk about that tomorrow, folks. But all of this goes to say that getting space allows you to make transactions to bring in new talent. We haven't seen that yet. And it is going to require some of these bigger moves. But what the Thuney deal does is let them sign a couple of guys today. A cornerback in Luke Barku, Elijah Lee, the linebacker. Who else did I miss here, Matt? It's
Corey
been a busy
Coleman.
day.
Wide receiver Corey Coleman.
Oh, right, Corey Coleman. Right. Who stands out in that group for you? Somebody that has a legitimate chance at making the roster.
I mean, of those three, I would probably say Elijah Lee stands out the most to me. He's been the defensive, let's say, reserve at times in his NFL career, but mainly he's been an all, four-phase special teams guy. And that you could certainly see him coming in here and playing that kind of role. Not an expense. I mean, none of these guys today were, expensive signings. I mean, they're all kind of vet minimum 1-year deals. I mean, there's no guarantee that all three of them are making the roster. Lee, to me, probably best profiles for, some of the things that the Chiefs need. Notable to me, especially because he might be more affordable than Ben Neiman, who's not yet signed for 22. But certainly at least a complimentary type piece, but somebody and Jordan O'Daniel as well. I mean, those were two linebackers that the Chiefs count on extensively for special teams. Both of them not signed up for 22 yet. Elijah Lee seems like he's probably the replacement for one of those guys.
Yeah, that's where I was leaning. I was leaning a little bit more towards O'Daniel because I think if push comes to shove and there's no interest in Neiman, I will now put it past them to bring him back just to play teams. If they do it right, he shouldn't be on the field for defense, but just to play teams, I think that they may see that that's worth it, and it may actually be.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and Lee is I think has played more defense than Dorian O'Daniel ever did, as far as a reserve. I mean, he was even basically a part-time starter at one point in his career. Not a ton of experience, but that was the one thing that Daniel was never able to do, was really to get onto the field and be that kind of reserve piece. So, but special teams definitely benefit there. The other two guys, honestly, to a degree, are flyers. I mean, Corey Coleman. Big name, I guess, because he was a former first-round pick. Kind of curious what you thought, because I never really thought he probably should have been a first-round pick, but
I had him in the 3rd that year, and he hasn't played
Yeah.
in 2 seasons. I think that tells you all you need to know.
He hasn't played. I mean, it's been injuries and suspensions and poor play have just kind of defined his entire career. I mean, that's a complete crapshoot. I mean, that's a guy that once again might not even make the roster. But
Mhm.
I mean, it certainly could be a competitive for that, one of those final spots. And Barku, Luke Barku, intriguing, but didn't play in 21. I mean, it's just once again, I mean, it's a depth piece at most, but you look at it in a week when the Chiefs are losing Mike Hughes and bringing in Luke Barku. I mean, I don't put them on the same level. I mean, if anything, I put Barku more in that category of a Chris Lamons.
Mhm.
Different players, but I mean, as far as where they are on a roster, and a depth standpoint, a competition standpoint, that's probably where I'd place him.
Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. Now, I bet that they're not done. They may sign someone tomorrow, folks, but we are going to be back tomorrow and talk about what this means for the draft philosophy for the rest of this offseason. Yes, they might have a shot at a trade as well. We'll get into that tomorrow. We appreciate you being here for us and making us your first listen. Check out Locked On NFL Draft. Check out Locked On NFL. Those YouTube channels are smoking right now, too. And we're going to have Matt back. Matt, thanks for your time today, and we'll get into some new stuff tomorrow.
Looking forward to it, Ryan.
Have a good one, everybody, and we will talk to you tomorrow.